welcome to episode 274 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Jessica Carr,
Michael O'Malley.
You have too many people. Today's episode
It's all of the best people, though.
So in this episode, we'll be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be continuing our Best of the Decade series with the year 2013. It's a year. We're not going to have any banter about the movie 2013 like we did last week, so I apologize.
There's a movie called 2013?
It's the sequel
Somebody
to 2012.
didn't listen to last week's episode. The sequel to 2012 when the apocalypse never comes. That was all just like John Cusack's dream. That's right.
On that note, let's talk about if you've ever felt the need to shake your hips and do the tango. Well, have we got a... Is that what that movie's about?
There's a tango in it.
Good.
It's absolutely about it.
Dylan and Andrew, take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to take the lead on this. Dylan and I went on an odyssey this weekend because the Bell Court in Nashville, for one day only, was showing a special 25th anniversary screening of Bellatar's Satantango. And I should also say Satantango gets a co-author credit with Bellatar's wife, the editor of the film, Agnes Haransky. But anybody who has heard of Satantango probably has heard one thing about it, which is that it's long. It is a 7.5-hour film. It is also the slowest of the slow cinema. That's kind of the mode Bellatar operates in. So that for 7.5 hours is, I mean, kind of a challenge, to be honest, right? Like, you read about the movie, and if you're me, you think, well, I should prove myself worthy and watch this movie, right? So the Bell Court was playing it at noon on a Sunday, so I drove for 3 hours, watched it for 7.5 hours, and then drove for another 3 hours back to Knoxville, and it was a day. The film is about, plot-wise, a farming commune in rural Hungary.
You did a whole day.
Shortly after the collapse of the communist regime in Hungary, I believe. And there are these two intersecting plots in the film. The one plot is about a man who... Dylan, what's this character's name again? Do you remember? No. Oh, Iremus, right? Aramis, I think is how you say his name. Who, in the backstory of the film, has like swindled a lot of people out of money, and he was possibly in jail, possibly dead, but now he has come back to town and he is attempting to scam the entire town out of their money and possessions. So that's one plot. And the other plot involves a young girl who tortures and kills a cat and then commits suicide. And there's just a lot of... There's a long stretch that's very painful to watch because of that. But the movie is presented in these 12 chapters, which is one of the things that makes the movie not feel quite as long as it is. I mean, it definitely still feels like a long movie, but you're not watching 7.5 unbroken hours of like one specific story. For the first half, I thought it was an anthology film where there would not be an overarching narrative whatsoever. You're getting these different snippets of different characters' lives, and it has an interesting structure to it. It's what's the word for this? Where it's kind of it's circling back around. It's recursive. It's a recursive structure where you'll watch one segment and then you'll watch a second segment that seems completely unrelated, but near the end of that segment, it will kind of loop its way back around to the beginning of the first one, and then they intersect. And so as the movie goes on, you get this broader and broader mosaic of all these characters and how they're interacting with each other and missing each other and sort of oblivious to the things going on in each other's lives. Tragically, the whole story with the young girl and the cat is something that all the characters are completely oblivious to. As far, I'm not sure what else to say in terms of what this movie is. That's pretty much the size of it. No pun intended. Dylan, do you want to give your like basic general take on this movie?
Sure. Let's see. So, I mean, just talking about Bellatar in general, the first one of his movies that I've seen was Werkmeister Chronicles or Harmonies. And that one felt relatively tighter than this, and as I watched that without having any idea about what it was about, really finding out it was more or less about revolution and, you know, this kind of violent uprising that was happening in the periphery, set a kind of context for me that was interesting about what Bellatar's work could be like. You know, it had the extremely set kind of like long takes or sticking with characters for long periods of times, and, you know, had a bigger ensemble that of characters that he works with. And then I watched Turin Horse, which I don't know. I don't want to say I liked a little bit less. It was just such a density of like his perspective and worldview with all of his collaborators over the years that I appreciated it, but it was like so contained and kind of suffocating, right? That it was like it'd be a thing that you could say I appreciated it more than any semblance of joy or
one does not simply enjoy a Bellatar film.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Some may think it's, you know, wading through tar, but
look at that. The puns keep coming. Sorry.
Please, we want people to listen to this podcast.
But so with Satantango, I've had it on my watch list for like a really, really like long time, like at least 5 years, and honestly, at this point, I can't even remember how it got on there.
I don't know.
Maybe a Twitter thing. It's hard to say.
I do know that I've mentally told myself that the only way I'm going to watch this movie is if I'm locked in a theater with strangers for a whole day.
Yeah.
I could not watch this at home. I would just like be on my phone or be pausing it all the time to leave the room for things. And so this was the right way to do it.
Yeah, particularly in retrospect, I definitely agree with you. And so I'm glad that Belcourt showed it to be able to have this experience and perspective. But, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think I may have, by the end of it, was still, like, sticking with it longer than you did, Andrew. That I think the back half of it, like, really started to grate on you. Like, okay, how long can we stick with these characters that at this point you definitely don't give a damn about? Or it's like, you know, you can feel a certain inevitability of what's going to occur after the middle section, which, you know, spoilers for a 7.5 hour movie, but when the little girl section happens and they have a funeral for her, like, there's such a diffusion of, like, emotion and things that are occurring that the center falls through in a significant way.
We talked about this after the movie, but I said it had a recursive structure, but it also has, like, this waveform to it where you have all these really disparate characters at the beginning, and as you get closer to the middle, they're all converging together, and then as you get further to the end of the movie, they begin to become disparate again, and there doesn't seem to be a clear direction to the end of the movie. You're just kind of like seeing all these threads spin out in unsatisfying ways, and that's the point. It's supposed to be, I think these threads, a lot of them are supposed to be dissatisfying. He's making a sort of point about how people can kind of be duped out of an ideal society by, I don't know, competitive interests or whatever. You also have the various farmer characters who are supposedly living in this harmonious commune, all sort of spying on one another and trying to double cross one another in the first half of the film. So he sort of already set it up as this society doesn't work. And then in the middle, when that tragedy happens, the tragedy gets co-opted by this bad actor, and everything just goes further and further to shit from there. So there's a political worldview that's being pushed by Bellatar here. But the fact that you have to experience that in like a 3.5 hour chunk and then another 3.5 hour chunk, like once you kind of know what all the pieces are, how they fit together, and where you're going, I found a little frustrating, which again, it's supposed to be frustrating, but I also really wanted that girl's death to matter, and I wanted that the fact that you watch this like prolonged animal torture scene that ultimately ends up not mattering, because what ends up being done with it is, like I said, it gets co-opted, and so it's more about how this doesn't how people don't recognize the way this matters than in the way that it does, which is a weird distinction to make, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I just want to touch on for sure, but to the point of the little girl, I remember you saying, and I agree with you, after we got out and were trying to like work through all of it, was you were touched by that scene, by her suicide by the end, because there's this narrator character that occurs at the end or the beginning of every chapter section that's kind of like leading you out of the section and kind of leaving you with this thought,
narrating characters' thoughts, and there's a really poetic stretch of narration during the girl's suicide scene where he says something along the lines of suddenly everything felt so simple, in the middle of this movie where everything is so complicated and so interconnected and in a way that interdependent in a way that's frustrating. Like, it's not all is connected, all is one, life is beautiful. It's like, everyone is constantly like undermining one another and competing with one another, and like there's a disharmony in the way that everything is connected as opposed to a harmony in which everything is connected. And so there was this moving sequence where you get the like delusional fantasy of the dying girl.
Right. I mean, and sadly, if that's going to be the center of the movie and the core of it that like gets taken away from you, I mean, on one hand, to your point, where it kind of gets, the whole sequence gets lost because the back half of the movie is dealing with the people who are got duped to go to this farm and potentially start this new farming commune together. But the mother of that little girl character, she just kind of disappears from the story. So it's like certain parts of the emotional fallout go away in a significant way after that happens. And I 100% agree. Like, or, it's clear that that's part of the story, that the Eremius or whatever, like the guy who's trying to dupe everybody, he entirely co-opts it to get more money out of them, to emotionally manipulate them. And when they're in the back half, like sitting in that farmhouse or whatever, soon to be mansion farmhouse, like trying to figure out what this guy's deal is and how much he's actually duping them, they immediately like, well, what was the deal with the little girl? Why are we? Who cares about this little girl?
Right.
We don't know her. She just died, right? I mean, and it's very frustrating, to your point, to having to emotionally experience this, and for us as the audience to get this wider picture of everything, and just watching everybody like slam into each other and like undermine each other.
And I think that
but
as we're talking about this and how dissatisfying and frustrating it is, I think it sounds like we're very down on the film, and I don't want to come across that way, because I actually, in the distance that I've gotten from it, I think I've appreciated it more. I think I like it more than I did as soon as it was over. Jesse was asking me, definitely the case with Bellatar movies, right? Jesse was asking me, like, just why would he do that? Why would he want to make a 7.5 hour film? And I quoted the show about the show, that scene where he's like asking the the campus judicial board if he can film them, and they're like, no, I don't think that's a great idea. And he said, well, it's a really great idea artistically. And I think that what Bellatar is doing is similar. Like, it's not necessarily fun to sit through, but it is a good idea artistically. Like, his whole thing as an auteur, as far as I understand, is he thinks that cinema does not reckon enough with real human time. Because we are so used to movies that are these very standardized runtimes. And so how do you mess with that? Well, you can slow your movies down, but you can also lengthen them. And there are also there are a lot of scenes in this that are slow, but there are also a lot of scenes in this that are not very slow. And the slowness that you experience really comes from the runtime more than the actual action on scene, on screen. But a couple of things that I want to make sure we talk about before we move on from this, things that I really like about it. Just the way that it's shot can make some really inherent, like, objectively non-compelling things very compelling. Like the best encapsulation of this for me is the opening shot of the film, which is a close to 10-minute shot of cows walking through a field and like
being let loose.
It's exactly the thing that happens chronologically at the end of the movie. They place it at the beginning, but you're seeing this very, very distant shot of a barn. A couple cows walk out of it, and it's like the frame is keeping the cows contained, like they do not wander from the edge of the frame. And then once a cow comes to the edge of the frame, the camera starts to widen a little bit to kind of make room for the cows as they're spreading. And, some of them start to wander off of the frame. You lose track of them. You're like, oh no, what happened to that cow? And then they all start walking in one direction, and then the camera starts following them, and it's this long tracking shot. And I got really invested in the fate of those cows. Just the fact of deciding to watch them for such a long time makes them compelling. I mean, it's the thing that I said in my Unbreakable video essay about the bull at the beginning of Uncle Boon Me, but like times 10, right?
Sure.
And then the other thing that I want to... go ahead, Dylan, sorry.
Wait, just to bounce off that point, I mean, parts of this movie, too, just in composition, they're just such, like, deep blacks in it. Like, there's, like, it's in a rural area, so, like, when it's nighttime, it's really nighttime. You're in the dark. So,
you can see like one light from a bar off in the distance, and it's like you're in a strange alternate universe, right?
Oh god, and the marshes too. But yeah, for particularly that, I mean, as frustrating it is to like watch the doctor character get around, because I mean, he's at his own pace, so you're just kind of hanging out with him. But yeah, when he's walking to the bar and it's just like seems so far away in the rain, and it's the only thing emanating light. I mean, it's effective. I mean, that's you really feel it after all of that. So what was
the other thing that I really appreciated about it is one particular musical composition that gets repeated several times throughout the film, and it's a recording of bells, church bells, and a lot of different church bells, all coming from different distances away. And there's an interesting bass progression that is swelling underneath them. And I don't know, I just found it to be an extremely satisfying drone in the middle of a kind of inherently unsatisfying movie. Like, it's always trying to frustrate your desire to move forward. Sure. Like, that music, just like sitting in that music, was so calming. And you can find it online. I don't know if I can pull up the name of it quickly enough. I think it's called like Harangue or something.
I think so.
Harangue by Vig Mahali. Such a good.
He's the guy who plays the bad guy in the movie. He's the guy that you hate.
One of my big negatives about this movie was that I don't think that he's a compelling screen presence at all. I know he's supposed to be this big bad, but he looks like he works in a GameStop. Whenever he dominates the screen for the last 3.5 hours, I just like, I am not intimidated by this man. Though, again, that might be part of the point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you on all of that. I mean, our intro. So yes, from the beginning, we're given like these hints and rumors about this character.
Yeah.
Right. And like that makes him seem more mysterious and ominous. Like I think we get this one phrase. It's like he's a magician that he can turn like cow shit into a castle.
Yeah.
This kind of thing. And so then when we actually see him, we like see him like waiting to like talk to like bureaucratic cops.
He gets introduced
right? So
in a comedic scene, so you think he's just comic relief, but then later, oh no, he is the antagonist. Everyone's
that's
talking
the guy.
about. Yeah,
right. And so yeah, we find out later he's like a snitch and actually like informing on everybody, and so fuck him twice. But this is it's to your point, Andrew. It's like a push and pull on that, where it's just like if it's so like deflating from the beginning, it's hard to then like feel that impending dread on everything else outside of the the situation with the like neglected or like forgotten about little girl. So it's like she's off on her own devices, like horribly messing and abusing that poor cat.
Yeah.
But I mean, sadly, then if it like all of this stress and tension and like undermining then to just serves this kind of like certain political point of not only like the faultiness and the undermining of all these like people left to their own devices after the fall of communism and the farming commune going away. I mean, it's also like this false utopia then to where the guy is convincing him that there's that they can all get together to start this utopia of a farm commune again after everything's fallen apart. But of course, he's there to just pull the wool over their eyes and just take their money.
Yeah.
And I think a point that you brought up, Andrew, is it kind of becomes disturbingly capitalistic in that notion to where it dangles that illusion, but then at the end of all of this, he sends all like the pair couples of families to like go do these kind of low-key menial jobs to stay out of the limelight or whatever, stay hidden, and like they're just gonna be a part of that societal structure again. So like the utopia is dangling in front of them in some indefinite future whenever they're supposed to get back together again. But for that to be the end, you're like, man, that fucking sucks. As the greater point or the feeling that it leaves you with by the end of it. You're like, ah.
Well, I guess that's the feeling that you should have at the end of a Bellatar film. That's the stamp of an auteur.
Oh my god, sure, right.
Anyways, we talked for a long time, but not nearly as long as that movie was. So, relatively speaking, I think that was a speedy.
Now, do you have is this a good starting point for the Bellatar cinematic universe? Like, do I need do I need to watch this in order to understand
good date movie.
when like he has like a team up version of all of his movies? Like what? Oh, really? Oh,
this is the team up.
I should go back and then get to this one.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Actually, no, I think that the Turin Horse is probably the team up movie because it's got all of his past collaborators in it. But, this is the team up movie. So you know how people go to those like MCU marathon screenings where they watch Iron Man, then they watch the Hulk, then they watch Thor, then they watch Avengers? The segments of this are kind of that. You get the different characters, and then like by segment 5, they're like, they're all in the same room. Holy shit!
They're all doing the tango. Oh my god.
They do the tango. Yeah. Yes, there's dancing.
They do the tango. There's an accordion scene. There's a guy with like a fucking piece of bread. And
oh my god, there are some silly fucking things in this movie. Guy balancing a loaf of bread on his head while people are doing the tango.
That's wild, guys. It's been 20 minutes. So
sorry.
You can find this on Bellatar Plus or other streaming sites that are similar. I don't know. If you got 7 hours and you want to watch this, I'd probably just
there's a Blu-ray coming out if you want to do that at home.
Get killed. Anyway,
look, if you do, like, just get whatever beverage of your choice and just like sit there and take it all in. Don't take any breaks. Just don't do it. Just go for it. Yeah, either way. Yes, taking breaks from the movie and or from
this is a weird time to
it works for you. It's fine.
Anyway, so can we do a quick transition?
Exactly
Michael, you saw a movie
Zach.
that has nothing to do with what they just talked about.
Well, Yeah, as a matter of fact, I saw a movie that is a mere instant in the mind of Bellatar, weighing in at like 120 or an hour and 20 minutes, I believe. Batman Ninja. Directed by
Bellatar?
I'm familiar with him. Probably mispronouncing it. Yeah, directed by Bellatar under the alias of Junpei Mitsusaki. Who notably also directed the weird version of Sturgill Simpson's most recent album. That's the only other thing I recognize here. But anyway, this is exactly what the title makes it sound like. Batman, as a result of a weird mishap with a time machine in the opening like 3 minutes of this movie, Batman and like Catwoman and Robin and the Joker and like 12 other Batman characters find themselves in feudal Japan. And for whatever reason, different characters arrive there at different times. And so like when Batman shows up, the Joker has already been there for months.
Is this like
I've not
Teenage
seen
Mutant
that,
Ninja
so I have
Turtles
no
3?
idea.
Is this have the same plot?
Is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 really
Okay.
gorgeously
All right,
animated?
fair enough. Sorry.
Because this movie is.
No, but there's
No
pizza.
in this
I'm gonna go with a
one,
no
so I'd
on
say
that.
No, it's not like that.
Yeah, there's pizza. That's gorgeous.
But anyway, so the Joker's been there for like
Okay, too
months prior to Batman showing up. I don't know, like somehow the time machine did that, and the Joker is now, or not just the Joker, but like several of the like big villains from the Batman bestiary have become like these like feudal lords who are trying to take over Japan. And so Batman shows up, and none of his technology works anymore because you can't find an outlet in feudal Japan. And he doesn't have internet access, which is like, and so like all his networks are down, and so he's got to learn how to be. Honestly, it seems more like a samurai. I'm not up on the nuances between ninja and samurai, but at any rate, Batman eventually dons like a sword and becomes like kind of this weird like kind of knight hero. Not a dark knight, but I guess a night knight. And it's, I don't have a lot of interesting or smart things to say about this movie other than like, one, it's very fun. Like it's a Batman movie, like totally divorced of like the gravitas of like what you might have seen in like, even like the Tim Burton Batman movies have a certain like heaviness to them. And this movie is just so light on its feet, and it's just so fun to just... it honestly reminds me of like Batman the Animated Series quite a bit. Although again, without like the dark elements of that series, where you're just kind of caught up in like this movie has no qualms in just doing like some really goofy stuff that's just like a lot of fun. And so this movie's a lot of fun, but B, this movie also is lusciously animated. It has this really cool aesthetic that I've mostly seen on TV, where it's basically like 3D polygons, but they're heavily cell shaded, and so it gives the kind of impression of like a hand-drawn movie. And so it has just these really detailed character models and these impressionistic backgrounds, and like that technology allows it to kind of shift styles at certain times. So like there's this one part where like Joker and Harley Quinn for some reason have become farmers. It's not really important why, and that whole sequence shifts in style into like this weird like impressionistic like sketchy style, and I don't know, there's just some like really striking visuals, and it's like really interesting to look at the whole time. And then plus it's just a really really fun movie about Batman and like the Penguin and the Joker and all those guys just fighting in feudal Japan. And eventually there's like they like make like a weird like some sort of like, I don't know, like a Middle Ages version of like a mecha like Batman or something, and so that gets thrown in there too by the end.
Of course.
And it's just unapologetically goofy and a good.
How does it in terms of its animation compare to something like Into the Spider-Verse, which I don't think anybody was expecting to be quite as virtuosic as it was on an animation craft level? I
mean, like, I think Into the Spider-Verse is interesting because in some ways it feels like it's without like a precedent. Like it's not like an unprecedented movie, but its visual style felt very unique to itself. Whereas I think Batman Ninja, like some of the the visual style is familiar. It's just a very like ornate version of it. Like so, if you're like familiar with like a lot of like modern anime, like I don't think it's gonna be like too out there, as far as like you're surprised at the style itself. But like I think what's really great about the style is just like the fluidity and the level of detail that it's given. Both on the level of just like how it's like the character models and like the like the literal things you're seeing, but also on the level of like the movements and that sort of thing. So Batman Ninja, I got it on DVD from Netflix because I do that, but I'm sure you could get it elsewhere, and I'm not sure how. But if you run across the DVD, it's a nice, fun hour 20-minute little adventure. Possibly rivals Satantango. Not gonna weigh in for sure on that one until I've sat down with that Bellatar.
How many times could you watch Batman Ninja before Satantango ends?
4? Probably 4, right? Or 5. You could probably watch it 5 times. So
At least
you could either
5.
watch this movie 5 times.
Those are the only
have
two
a jolly
options.
good time.
These are the two things you could
Have
do.
a jolly good time. Yeah. Watch this movie 5 times in a row, or be locked in the Bell Court with no bathroom breaks.
Oh, I should say there were 2 bathroom breaks, though they were not nearly long enough. They were 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Also, not Dylan
Yes, it's
sanctioned bathroom breaks apparently. But you probably won't even need a bathroom break for Batman Ninja, and if you do, it's probably not in a theater, and you can just pause it and just go to the bathroom in your house. So
There you go.
I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It's a lot of fun.
He could have like taken it to the next level and just used the bathroom on himself to like power through the movie, but whatever.
It's probably part of the outsourced vision.
That's true.
Batman Ninja, recommend.
All right. Well, Batman Ninja, for those who want to make time in their lives for other people and other things, that's available. In that same vein, Jessica, you have a movie that I think it's about. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's coming from the same people who made like the Christian movies like Fireproof and like those movies. Is that
Really?
I'm sorry.
No.
It just seemed like kind of
No,
like something
that's
they'd yell at
incorrect.
you, like, "Why don't you go play in hell?" And I'm
wrong.
like, "Okay, all right, go ahead. I'm here till Thursday, people."
No. Okay, we talked about Satan's Tango. We talked about Batman Ninja. Now we're gonna talk about Playing in Hell with 2013.
Who knows what year this
apparently
movie came out?
Not 2013 in America, so thanks America. Because I was going to talk about this in the second half,
Oh,
but
shit.
you guys get to hear it in
Patreon
the
exclusive.
first half because we were confused about what date it was being released. So anyways, so I got to show my friends Why Don't You Play in Hell by Sion Sono, which I loved when I watched it back in 2014, but I was like very curious to see how the movie would hold up because it's a very high energy, you gotta be there for it
So a
type
Sion
of film.
Sono
Which,
movie?
if you've ever seen a Sion Sono film, that's generally what his vibe is like. But I rewatched it, and I have to say that
That's
it
a way
still
to say it.
slaps 5 years later. And Andrew didn't think so, but he can talk about that in a second. But it's hard to really say what the movie is about because it kind of like shifts tones, but the frame of it is a group of young amateur filmmakers who in high school decide that they just want to make a movie, and there's specifically
Ambitious.
there's specifically a main character who is the director, and he's like, he doesn't want to make a bunch of movies. He wants to make one amazing movie. The best movie of a lifetime type of thing. And he has 2 of his friends are the camera operators, and then he has his action star that he found, which is supposed to be the Bruce Lee of Japan, and he wears a Bruce Lee jumpsuit, which is really funny. And so they are very passionate, and they're like, we're gonna make movies, nothing can stop us, like, the world is our oyster, we could do this. And then, 10 years later, it shows them as, like, older adults, and they still haven't made the movie that they wanted to. They're hanging out in this, like, very rundown theater that is going out of business. Their, like, mentor has passed away because he was really old, and the director character is still very, like, fired up about cinema. He's like, it just hasn't happened for us yet. But the, like, action star Bruce Lee wannabe character is like, I'm done with this. Like, we are too old to be doing this. We need to get jobs. We need to move on with our lives. And then all of a sudden, like, the cinema god answers their prayers, and they have to make a film for the Yakuza, and it turns into this just very insane thing. And there are lots of moments in the movie where you're like, I don't actually know what's happening, but it's amazing.
There's a toothpaste commercial.
There's a toothpaste commercial. There's there's a girl who's just, like, sliding in blood. A young girl just sliding in blood.
That seemed to happen in the Bellatar movie, so that's not a big deal.
Oh, okay, cool. But I don't know. Like, I think that the movie, like, the core of the movie is, it's an ode to what movie making was like before they were money-making machines, like, just making movies for the love of it. And I think that Sion Sono is able to kind of, like, take a look at that as, like, what are we doing as filmmakers and why are we doing it? And he's, like, making commentary about it, but in a nice way. Like, I don't think that he is being nihilistic about it. I think that he is saying, like, you can still make movies for the love of it. You don't have to be churning out, like, these blockbusters. You can still make these, like, indie films that you and your friends are passionate about. And the reason why this movie was so relevant to me and to Paige, who is also watching it, is because we made a short film recently called Crone's Holland Bones. So I'm going to plug our short real quick. And
for the Yakuza?
We made it, and it was like,
yeah,
a
they
thing
made it
where,
for
like,
the
we didn't
Yakuza.
have any money. What? No, not for the Yakuza. And
It just happens.
I thought she was comparing it, and I was like, oh, that was a strange turn, but okay.
We did not make it for the Yakuza. We made it for a comedy film festival, which is, like, the same thing as the Yakuza, right? And
If the Yakuza are listening, patreon.com/cinematary.
yes, thank you. Give us more money to make movies, thank you. But yeah, so it was really great for me to watch. It was really great for Paige to watch because she is a director, she is a filmmaker, and she was saying, like, this is what, like, movie making is all about. It's like, you don't have a lot of resources, but if you have friends that are passionate about what they're doing, then you can make it happen. And, like, sounds corny, like, oh, dreams do come true, but it was actually a really great movie to watch, to just say, like, you should continue making films, you should continue making art, because it is worth it. So
Hey Jessica.
yes,
What's the name of the group? What are they called? I'm trying to remember. They're
the Fuck Bombers. You're welcome.
On that good point, we're going to head into the break because everybody's asleep at this point. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back, and I promise we will not be talking about 7-hour-long movies after this.
Hey, Cinematariats, this is your co-host Lydia Creech with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we definitely want your money. We still want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema, but now we're getting into the Patreon game, baby. We've brought on a lot of new voices to contribute to the site, and we want to honor our responsibility to compensate all these smart people for their hard work. To help us out, head over to patreon.com/cinematary to sign up at the $5 a month level. In exchange, our patrons will get an exclusive bonus episode every month, weekly shoutouts on each episode of the show, and the ability to dictate a movie for us to cover eventually. If money's tight, we get it. There are still a few things you can do that we would greatly appreciate. First, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. That's free to help us reach more listeners. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to Zach@cinematary.com. That's Zach, Z-A-C-H, to let us know your thoughts, and we will read them out and respond to them on future episodes. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we put out every week. So, to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, share with your friends and family, and sign up to be a patron. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and now back to the show.
Hang me, oh hang me, I'll be dead and gone. Hang me, oh hang me, I'll be dead and gone. I wouldn't mind the hanging, but the laying in the grave so long, poor boy, I've been all around this world. I've been all around Cape Girardeau, parts of Arkansas, all around Cape Girardeau, parts of Arkansas. I got so goddamn hungry I could hide behind a straw. Poor boy, been all around this world.
And we're back with part 2 of episode 274 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be reliving our past and talking about the best films of 2013. We need like the little like the Twilight Zone like going back in time noise.
Or was it Wayne's World? It's like
the first episode, or Wayne's World. So the first episode of Cinematary is us talking about the best films of 2013. And it's also an incredibly awkward hour-long affair. So
It's actually not. I re-listened to it about an hour ago, and I was surprised by how like jovial with each other and like entertaining the conversation is. There are definitely moments in which it hasn't aged well, like certain movies we talk about haven't aged well, or you know, there are things about us that have become like our personalities that have become cliche by this point in the podcast. But I was surprised by how well the episode held up.
how many times did you bring up gender politics?
In
many times did you bring
one
up
of the
gender
first
politics in that
lines
episode?
of the podcast.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. That's so good. I'm so glad. Hi, my name's Andrew Swafford, Gender Politics, and oh my god. All right, so Andrew, lead us off with a nice clip from this, because this is going to lead us into our
Okay,
conversation.
I have to
feel
say,
like.
when I play these clips, the way that I'm doing it is I'm playing it over the loudspeaker of my laptop with a mic. So if you laugh, you will laugh over the clip. So save your
don't
laughter
laugh
for the
until
end of
after.
the clip. Otherwise, people will not be able to hear it. Yes. Or maybe mute yourself or something. Okay. So I have several clips that I'd like to play. They're all pretty short to get us into it, and then we'll talk about like the actual movies that we discussed then, but this is just like fun stuff. Here is the opening of the first Cinematary podcast. Here it is.
And welcome to the first ever episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast for the TNJ and Radio. I'm Zach Dennis. I'll be leading this discussion. With me are the two leaders of the UT Cinema Club. Guys, would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Dylan Moore, President of UT Cinema Club.
I'm Andrew Swafford, Vice President of UT Cinema Club.
Let me just introduce the podcast real quick. It is a discussion-based conversation, really. I mean, we're just going to be talking about movie-related topics. We have 3 main topics, and then we'll probably steer off a few times. I'm trying to think. We have, hopefully not too much. We have a best of 2013 list.
an anticipated for this coming up year list, as well as we'll break down the Best Actor category for the Oscars, which is coming up.
We'll probably touch on Best Actors too.
Best Actress.
Gender equality, you know.
Yeah, we'll make everybody happy. The ladies. Dylan agrees with keeping the ladies happy.
Yeah. Yep.
Reactions.
Holy shit, that guy would not shut the fuck up.
That guy would not shut the fuck up.
The Untitled
movie
podcast.
Like, shut the hell up.
The same.
I was about to say.
I
this
can't
sounds
tell if
like-
that's good or not. Wait a minute.
Nothing has
guys.
changed.
Not that nothing has changed, but like you have the structure of the podcast down more now, but I like the timbre of your voice.
Still unclear.
Anyway, I liked my favorite part of the entire clip was that Dylan
that's-
introduced
that's
himself
not an
with
insult.
Dylan Moore. Like he forgot his name, which he does every goddamn time.
I don't refer to myself as myself. It's a problem. I don't know what you're talking about.
So the next clip that I would like to play is, I mentioned that there are things about us that have become cliche, like me mentioning gender equality in the beginning of this episode. Another classic. I want you to tell me if you know what cliche this clip is.
Is there a bingo card? Did I miss the bingo card?
Today, I don't know if you guys saw Prisoners this year. I'll botch this name. Dennis Villanueva. He's Spanish.
He's Spanish.
Also, cause of Spanish.
He's
Oh
French
my God.
Canadian.
Then again, we didn't correct him, so I don't know.
We didn't know either. We didn't know either.
Yeah.
But one indication of how times have changed is how Dennis Villanueva is now or Dennis Villeneuve, however you say his name, is like a household name
The
now.
Spanish guy?
The Spanish guy?
The Spanish guy. Oh, okay, hold on. I have another fun one here. I'm looking for it. It's coming. We can cut this part out when Zach is editing this
I just cut the whole thing.
I just got the whole thing.
Okay. This was one of the funniest things that I came across in episode 1, which shows how our tastes have changed and how we have responded to the shifting movie landscape, and that is this.
When I make anticipated lists, I don't know. I feel like I focus mainly on the blockbusters. I can't those indie movies that kind of pop out of nowhere.
You can't anticipate those.
And so that's what's just funny when I look at my I can't wait for a list at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, none of them really
smashed by the ones that pop out of nowhere. Right.
But my first one I wrote down. This one, just as a superhero junkie, I'm gonna want to see is Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know if you guys have read anything about that.
Hope that guy got killed.
There's a long stretch of the
That's true.
first episode where Zach is explaining the world of Guardians of the Galaxy to us because it is fundamentally bizarre. And we're like, oh, they're gonna make a movie about that, and here we are.
That clip in here because that sounds hilarious.
I mean, it's long. If you want me to find it, I will.
No, it's fine. I'll dig it up later.
Okay, I have
Drown myself with it.
2 more quick things I want to play back to back. One of which is a really insightful point that Zach makes. That actually
And then I went downhill after then.
presaged the existence of this series. Actually, here is Zach talking about the legacy of the year 2013.
I think with the Oscars, I don't generally agree with them, but it's one of those. One, it's good discussion always to just have have a point of discussion, but and it's not representational of the films for that. I think especially this year, American Hustle goes out and wins Best Picture. That's not going to be the film that we're going. 2013 American Hustle. We're going to go 2013 12 Years a Slave, Gravity, Her, Inside Llewyn Davis. Those kind of movies. And so I think it's just a fun night to give out awards and try to recognize to the best of their ability. But it's not what's representing in 2013 for sure. I think the best way to represent 2013 is 5 years later go look back at the movies that were nominated or some that weren't nominated and go, well, this is what we're still working off of today. I think the best example of that is The Social Network, which didn't win Best Picture a couple years ago, but just look at how many movies are heavily influenced by that movie compared to the winner, The King's Speech. How many movies are like The King's Speech?
Right.
How many movies are like The Social Network? The Social Network made a way bigger impact than any of the other movies that year.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about being a traditional film versus being an innovative film, which I think The Social Network did, and didn't get the award because it did both things.
Exactly, yeah.
We recorded a podcast about that like 2 weeks ago.
Go away. No problem.
What can I say? I'm like maybe like the reincarnation of Lights Camera
No way.
Jackson. I don't
No
know.
problem.
I'm a movie sage, so
And I have another fun one, but I actually think I maybe would be better if I saved it for the end. But we can move into the actual movies you talked about. You heard a couple titles that Zach dropped. He mentioned Gravity, 12 Years a Slave, Her, Inside Llewyn Davis. And on that first episode, we do give long reviews to the 5 movies that we collectively thought were the best of that year, the ones that made the most impression on us. Those movies were Her, Inside Llewyn Davis, Upstream Color, Don John, and Before Midnight. So I guess we can kind of move into talking about the titles now in retrospect, looking back over 5 years later, what does seem like the really significant titles. I know, Zach, yours still is Inside Llewyn Davis, right?
let me tell you, it sure as hell ain't Don John. How did that age? Woo! JGL and Scarlett Johansson, man. Woo!
Wow. Shots fired.
Yeah, I
Rude.
think the only 2 that I rewatched this week was Inside Llewyn Davis and Her, and rewatching Inside Llewyn Davis. I think we talked about this, Michael. I think we talked about this in the first episode of the series. We were talking about like the Coen brothers and trying to find like the different Coen brothers movies throughout the decade that you can kind of. Yeah, and I feel like this one that stands out a little bit more than any of the other films that they've done in the past decade. Not only just being a Coen Brothers movie, but just being a kind of a standalone film on its own, is that it carries all of the qualities that I think was what I was responding to in 2013 when I was, working out of being a superhero junkie, and because it still has that just incredible performance by Oscar Isaac. It has just the medley of who no one really knew at the time. You had,
And also, like, sorry for interrupting again, but it has Adam Driver in that tiny role, and like in the first episode, we referred to him as that character from Girls.
Wow.
And
right.
so like now Oscar Isaac and Adam Driver are both like in fucking Star Wars movies, which in outer space. So I mean, worth mentioning how
Wow.
this movie was
Get
a
outta here.
flashpoint
Space.
for
They
both
knew.
of those actors who then went, all the way up the cultural ladder, right?
And I was thinking about the movie kind of in a larger respect after I finished watching it, and because I was like, well, why this one when it comes to for the entire year, as well as like the Coen brothers output over the past 10 years. And I was thinking about how recently they've really been kind of playing with the idea, and they've been doing this probably their entire career, but they love exploring the American myth and kind of the American story and the fabric that makes up how we perceive the American dream. And this one feels, I feel like this is the most like true version of that. You have this character who is hopelessly trying to achieve this goal, who has a degree of talent, clearly not enough talent in order to take the steps necessary, or he has the talent and he has the inability to do the steps required in order to get to that place, which feels very American to me. And the fact that while it never is very clear whether it's his fault or it's just the system's fault, but the entire time he's getting punched and knocked down left and right. And I feel like this is a type of story that they've been telling over and over and over again, and there was something about just just all of the different pieces coming together with this, whether it's the performance, whether it's just the way that it's shot, the soundtrack that I feel like has lived on past just the movie, and just all of those different elements, they all came together and told the story of the American experience through the eyes of the Coen brothers, in a way that it just is a much more refined version than what they've done over the past few years.
I also rewatched this week, and I agree. And I think one of the things that, so it in a certain way, it's like of a piece with like a Serious Man or Barton Fink or something like that. Those kind of like existential movies that focus on a single character and they're kind of like absurd misadventures. But I think like Inside Llewyn Davis, which I really liked and have really liked, but this time I think I would rank it like maybe my favorite Coen Brothers movie. But I think one of those reasons is it's two things. Like one, like I think this is like one of the loneliest movies of all time. Like Llewyn, there's just this profound like isolation that I think is like in some ways a little bit comedic, but mostly it's just like crushing and oppressive. And then the other thing is that the movie is just suffused with loss. He's had this partner who killed himself at some unknown time before the movie begins, and like I think those two elements add this like deep pathos to the movie that like some of those like kind of ironically like existential movies that this movie is in its lineage of that the Coen Brothers have done, like there's not quite that. It's less cosmic and more personal, I feel like. And just that push and pull between like his horribly like, and like self-destructive behavior that isolates him from people, and then like this system that is not going to accommodate that either, and like just has him just walking by himself under like an overpass in Chicago with the snow blowing around him, or like driving in a car on some interstate with just like a dying deer, or that sort of thing. Like there's just this like palpable sense of just like how alone he is, and I don't know, I really responded to that like strongly this time.
To your point, Michael, of like referencing both The Serious Man and Barton Fink as like a lineage through to this movie, those characters were played a lot more for comedy, and they're kind of like self-absorption that kind of like leads them to like hurting other people, or it's just that amount of pathos as you mentioned with the loss from the beginning, right? It's not like you're leading into it where like in A Serious Man, the through line is like, but I've done nothing, right? Like it's this guy that we kind of wake up in a David Byrne-esque how did I get here situation for that one. And Barton Fink is like, he's incompetent when he's like stuck with writer's block. So you get that level of like entirely overwhelming existential crisis where things are like putting upon you in a very real way. But Oscar Isaac plays his character as like more of an asshole. So like I can feel it like being really grating for a lot of people, and like why that would make it a hard watch and to even care about what's going on. But I think it changes the tone of the passivity compared to A Serious Man and Barton Fink to where it's like they're struggling in their own like centered way, but in here he's not taking it in the same way. He's complaining about it, he's mad about it, but because from the very beginning there's a profound loss as like what's looming over the whole movie, as you say, of his loss of his partner. I mean, it brings it immediately to that center. So
if we were gonna like kind of shift gears and look at kind of like big picture within the decade, I also think, I mean, Zach, you mentioned the soundtrack, and this isn't something that we have to ruminate on, but I do think like one of the things that places this movie definitively within 2013 is like the role of folk music, and particularly Marcus Mumford on the soundtrack, which is very much like a moment of the early 2010s that like this would be the musical milieu that, you know, the Coen Brothers movie was drawn to, and specifically putting Marcus Mumford on the soundtrack is like really pointed, feels like.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about a year, one year when there was like weird indie folk music at the top of the pop charts. Like I remember, to kind of reference forward to a movie that we'll talk about later, I remember going on spring break that year and hearing people listening to Mumford & Sons on the beach, like it was not Skrillex dubstep music, as Harmony Korine suggested. It was Mumford & Sons.
Some kind of mood.
But this,
Weird
I mean,
fucking
but this
time.
movie is definitely like the best version of that. I mean, a lot of that's kind of grating, but
well, I
like
mean, even this
use of
movie though like
traditional
makes fun of
songs.
some of that, right?
I'm sorry, what?
I mean, even this Inside Llewyn Davis makes fun of some of that, right? Like it's
Well, having
aware
Dylan,
of its
like
certain
Bob
kind
Dylan
of like
at the end and all that, like definitely is poking fun at it, I think.
Sorry, but what were you saying? You were.
I think also the use of traditional songs and melodies also like gets rid of some of the kitsch of like what that, you know, because I remember going to a concert. I don't remember who the band was that I was going to, but the opening act like legit like was like had like fiddles, and they were playing like they looked like they were from like the antebellum South, like white people from the antebellum South, like with these like elaborate dresses and stuff like that. And there was definitely like this high kitsch element to like we're urbanites play acting at like what we imagine like this kind of like rural sound is, to like that whole like indie folk thing. Whereas this, like setting it within like the folk revival in like the Village in New York, but also like having the music be like the traditional songs, I think makes it a bit more timeless and less tied to that like folk pop thing that was going on.
I mean, and sadly too, with like the end sequence right before, you know, Llewyn, that leads to the opening scene, he gets his ass beat because, you know, he's making fun of a woman who's coming into town to play that traditional.
Coming from rural Arkansas too, like she's
Right,
not
okay.
a New Yorker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then Bob Dylan shows up,
Right, that's right.
and the whole scene's dead.
Uh-huh. Scene's dead right before it gets that kind of popular. Yeah.
Also, kind of harkening back to the 2010 episode we did, another Justin Timberlake appearance.
Weird.
Yeah, I
that's
think
right.
these are his
Yeah.
two big movie roles, right?
The early promise of Justin Timberlake's acting career that then turned into some movie about him being a time
And a troll?
traveler, and then
Is that the Trolls
Not-
movies?
not acting anymore after that. Well, he is in the Trolls movies. That's not the one I was
It's like
thinking
In
about.
Time or something, right? I don't remember watching it, but
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
with with
Time is in the
Seyfried.
title.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's not a time travel movie. It's like
is this
I've
fucking
seen this
movie?
movie.
They run out of
they each-
time. Yeah.
Oh, time
Yeah,
is a
Time
currency.
Yeah,
In Time
right.
is
you
what
have
this
like a
movie
little
is called.
display on your.
Oh, that was 2011. That was before this, actually.
No! Ah!
What if the title of the movie was Just
Yeah.
in Time?
Thank you, Michael.
Jessica, now that you've upstaged us all with the best line of the podcast, do you have thoughts about Inside Llewyn Davis?
That's right. Well, like, I think in general, with Coen brother movies, it's hard for women to relate to them, I think. At least most of them. But, like, Inside Llewyn Davis has, like, a sadness to it that I think that any adult person can relate to. And when I first watched it back in 2013, I just kind of felt like it was a sad boy movie where I was like, oh, this guy's sad, and that's what it's all about. But like, I've grown to appreciate it over the years. Being an adult and having the world just kind of like beat you down, I feel like I can appreciate it more. And I listen to the soundtrack a lot, and I think about how sad the movie is when I'm listening to the soundtrack, but it's a really good one.
Yeah. Me and Jesse had a similar experience. We watched it the other night. And the first thing she said after the movie was over was like, this movie hits differently being an adult holding down a job and like struggling to pay bills. We've not had the sort of economic indignity that Lewin does in this movie because he's homeless. But I think that at the time when I watched this in 2013, I was thinking it was a movie about music, and comparing it to someone who was very close to me at the time, who was a professional musician and was really struggling. But really, it's a movie about money in general, and music is just one way to make money, and just struggling to make any money whatsoever doing a thing that you like, and then having to deal with the harshness of the world when you can't do that. So yeah, I think that as I get older and rewatch this film, I find it more resonant, more relatable. I was kind of down on it in the first episode of Cinematary because I thought that the character was too unlikable. But I actually didn't think he was that much of a dick. Like his general attitude of the world felt kind of understandable to me given his circumstances. But yeah, I think it is strong. I'm not quite as personally in love with it as you are, Zach and Michael, but I do think it is really good.
Speaking of sad boy movies, let's transition to Her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was the movie that all of us unanimously agreed was our favorite.
Yeah,
of
I was about to
2013 in the
say,
first
like,
episode.
what is it about 2013 where there are like such good movies
this
about
the other
isolation?
night, and I was kind of worried to go rewatch Her.
Well, I mean,
I hadn't watched it since like 2015-ish. It's been a couple years. It's been a decent amount of time, and I feel like just in the culture of today, the sad boy who falls in love with the device that's voiced by Scarlett Johansson just immediately sounds a little like eyebrow raised. Like, I mean, it's nice that they're giving a person of color a prominent role in the movie for Scarlett Johansson, but
I feel like Andrew is so sick and tired of these Scarlett Johansson jokes.
I saw a great tweet the other day. It was a gif of somebody looking at a phone and then like doing a mind blown face about like you people coming on here making the same Scarlett Johansson joke every single day.
One of the things while rewatching it, I didn't necessarily have the same reaction in like overwhelming affinity for it that I did when it initially came out. I think a lot of the as I texted Andrew when I started watching it, the dude's name's Theodore Twombly, and we let that shit go for some reason. The twee aesthetic of it, I just kind of, that completely washed over me. I just was not, that wasn't really latching on to me like I think it did in 2013 or 2014 when I last watched it.
I did not have time to rewatch this. I would have liked to, but I get Theodore Twombly as a name being twee, but just the general aesthetic of the futuristic world that they make, does it not feel like the inside of an Apple store? Like, is there not a way in which that makes sense?
I think that maybe the aesthetic of the movie, I've not watched it super recently, but I've watched it more recently than 2015, I think. I think the aesthetic of that movie became a lot less special when that became like the operating like assumption of what the future would look like. And so you have like a lot of sci-fi since then that adopts that same sort of like Apple-y vision of future tech. So like, half of Black Mirror is like that, and like any number of other examples.
One of my
even-
least favorite tropes of internet film discourse in recent years is somebody saying like this film feels like a Black Mirror episode. I remember people saying the same thing about Nerve and Unfriended, and I could see people saying it about Her as well. The Black Mirror wasn't a thing when Her came out, so fortunately it was spared that discourse. But
I think it's like beyond like even Black Mirror. I mean, you've got movies like Ex Machina, which I think came out a couple years after this one, that like also has like the sort of imagine like current like Silicon Valley design trends, but the whole world is taken over by them. And I think that for me the aesthetic of this movie doesn't feel that special anymore. And I remember when I watched it, like I don't think I would have included it as one of the best movies of 2013 when I watched it in 2013 or 2014, whenever it came out in Knoxville. But one of the things I did really like, I remember, was the kind of like technological like vision of world.
Because there have been so many other, fictional worlds that have taken these aesthetics and used them as well, as they should, because like it's a no-brainer. If you are going to imagine a slightly dystopian future, you're going to make it into a Silicon Valley corporate thing, because that's kind of the world that we live in. Shouldn't we be giving her credit for doing it first as opposed to knocking it for starting the trend?
No, yeah, I think so too. But you can go back and watch. I mean, to make an absurd example, you can go back and watch the movie that made the first like shot reverse shot, right, and appreciate that. But it's also not going to blow your mind. And so I think like I've had a sort of a milder version of that with Her, which is that like I appreciate it. Like, oh yeah, this was. I realized that this was cool and cutting edge, but now I've seen this done in so many different iterations that it ceased to be a thing that's special about it.
What is the best movie to do that aesthetic? What's the best version of that?
I don't know. I mean, maybe Her is the best.
If Her is not the first but best, if it's not the best but first, what would be the best?
I don't know. I mean, Her might be the best just because it not for the visual design, but it takes the ideas the most interesting places. The way that the AI kind of like ascend and that sort of thing. I think is it like takes the movie like one act further than a lot of these movies often go. And I appreciate that. So, like, as far as thinking about that.
The thing that going in kind of concerned me revisiting this movie is that, again, at its core, the story is this kind of lonely, semi-apathetic guy who can't find, any sort of human interaction that he finds to be satisfactory, and so he kind of insulates himself into this world with this AI, and the movie, like, thinking about it afterwards, it does make an interesting point about how we isolate ourselves and form our, create these echo chambers that are kind of insulating our conversations and what is happening around us. I think that Her understands that because it is isolating all of the people using the different technologies, and just the nature of his work, where he writes these personal letters for people in order to kind of shape their relationships, like the concept of the distancing of intimacy and relationships, and just in general, from romance to friendships, just anything, feels very astute in this movie. But at the same time, I was very worried about just the relationship at the whole, because I think that on the outside looking in, it's like this kind of romantic, and I think that this was definitely something that I was tapping into when I was enjoying it in 2013, 2014, was it was like, oh, like, if you are this kind of lonely outsider person that's looking for this kind of companionship, like, this is like it's kind of that perfect amalgamation of all of that, and I feel like that now is not necessarily that can really shift into being kind of a toxic thing, but I also feel like,
and I think that maybe
I was just gonna say that just the final, like, I think that this movie does make a comment on that, like, it does address that. It doesn't just leave that. So going back and rewatching it, I did appreciate that it did make that point.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's possible that in 2013 what we were connecting to was kind of appreciating it for the wrong reasons, like getting really invested in this romantic relationship, that this unconventional romantic relationship that the movie presents. But I think that
it's a very intellectual relationship, and I think that that's something that's the most appealing about it, is that it is this like
something that's
like
not
the thing
surface at all, right?
It is like the thing that is attractive to him is that he can have these conversations, these deep conversations with her, and that you don't have that sense of uncertainty or anxiety or judgment. Like it's all working through that, and so there's like this kind of there is this kind of detached quality where you're able to just experience that and kind of recognize that that's happening in a way that if you were doing it, like if you were in reality trying to interact with people doing that, you have all of that, and it kind of takes the romance and the the attraction out of it.
Yeah, but what I was going to say was that I think what makes her distinct from all these other big tech panic Silicon Valley sci-fi movies is the emotional dimension of it. And I think that her understands, like, it's not just intellectually trying to scold people for being on their dang phones too much, which I think was my takeaway, and one thing that I brought up in the original episode was like, oh, this movie is about how people are spending too much time with technology and not enough time with real people in their real lives, which there is an element of that, because the last shot of the movie is Joaquin Phoenix like looking at Amy Adams' character in a way that suggests that he is finally kind of like engaging with her as a human in a way that he wasn't before. But whatever. I think that one thing that it understands about people's relationship to technology is that it is an emotional relationship. Like, that we are not just on our phones all the time because we are addicted to them, though that's an element, and the phones are kind of designed to addict us and all this stuff. But also, what people are getting out of, being constantly online is a type of emotional connection. Like, people aren't addicted to their phones; they're addicted to like escaping from loneliness or escaping from boredom or whatever. And like, for her to frame that as he has an emotional connection with this device, I think is actually really astute to think about. Like, I don't know, I think a lot of my students have like serious like emotional connections to their phones. Like, I've had it described to me this way, like, if you are in an unfamiliar space, like you're visiting a house of somebody, like a house that doesn't belong to you, and you don't know a lot of people in that house, you're probably going to spend a lot of time like hanging out in a corner looking at your phone, because you have like more emotional history with that phone and the things that it allows you to like see through its portal than you do with anybody else there. Like, your phone kind of knows you better than so many other people in your life. So I don't know. I think that Her is a pretty good like representative movie of like a movie of the moment, in terms of something that was really tapping into a thing in the zeitgeist that was really important in 2010. And I think it does it really well. I mean, I haven't rewatched it as recently as you have, Zach, but every time I've watched it, I've really, really liked it.
Broadening it out from these movies that we've talked about, what is there any other movies that you want to bring in and talk about that you feel like, as 2013 Zach said, kind of stands the test of time and is able to is a movie that people are kind of drawing from more than the 12 Years a Slave won the Oscar that year.
Yeah, I mean, the Oscars were really dominated by 12 Years a Slave, Gravity, Dallas Buyers Club, and Blue Jasmine. And of those, I guess 12 Years a Slave is the one that gets talked about the most, but I mostly hear it talked about in a negative way.
Wolf of Wall Street absolutely was the
that's
one that
right.
gets talked about the
Though
most.
it didn't win any awards.
It didn't win, but I think that's the one that looms largest for, I think, like, obviously, like, social political reasons involving, the legacy of Occupy Wall Street, and that, plus the legacy of it as a dude.
The best conversations I've had about The Wolf of Wall Street, which is a movie that I have a complicated relationship with and have struggled with like deciding whether or not I like it since 2013. Those best conversations have been with you, Michael. Like I think you are better at talking about Wolf of Wall Street than anybody I know. So like what is your general take on like how we should feel about Wolf of Wall Street, especially with so many years removed from it, and Scorsese very much like still being in the modern film discourse?
Well, I don't know how like you should feel about it because I don't know. You guys decide. But my personal take on it usually fluctuates based on the last person I've talked to with it, right? Because I've had this really unsettling. So when I first watched it, I think probably I didn't actually see it in the theater. I saw it later on, like I think I rented it or something like that. Like the next year, so in like 2014, I guess. And my thought was that it was a less interesting version of movies that Scorsese had done before, and I thought it was kind of blunt and like, but I liked it. It was, for a 3-hour movie, it moves, and like, I was like, okay, yeah, these Wall Street bros suck and they're awful and they ruin people's lives and et cetera, et cetera. And then I started talking to other people about it, and some people felt that same way, and some people really liked it or whatever. But then I started, talking to people like, for instance, I remember talking to my brother, and my brother just thought he was like Jordan Belfort was hilarious, and I was like, really? Like, I kind of thought he was just, like, awful, and he was like, I mean, he is, but it's hilarious, and, like, and then I started teaching a few years later, and I remember talking with some of my students about it, and my students kind of viewed him, like, aspirationally, which, like, made me think, like, ooh, that makes me feel very uncomfortable about this movie. But then, if I talk to it among people, like, I don't know, like my parents, who are not like, very leftist people in general, I would say, but like who their takeaway from the movie was, boy, this guy sucks and I hate everything he stands for. And so that makes me really like the movie. And so it's this kind of like roller coaster of feelings based on like how I perceive people reacting to it, which isn't maybe the most like helpful way to evaluate my own stance with the movie, because I think like, if I'm trying to distance myself from all that, my main takeaway is still that, like, it's in the legacy of, like, these, like, crime epics, basically, that Scorsese's done, like Goodfellas and Casino and stuff, where, he's drawing a line between, like, the quote-unquote, like, aspirational American dream systems that we say that we like, and then the actual, like, seeing the sausage made of, like, what it takes for a person to achieve, like, what we view as, like, that highest echelon, and, like, just how awful and toxic it is. And I do feel like it's I don't know, maybe it's like good as an iteration of that, but it's not my favorite of those, and that's still how I feel. But then, like, if we're talking about the larger conversation of how it fits within the, of its legacy, I have complicated feelings about that, because I've seen, like, really divergent reactions to the movie.
Yeah, and I think that one of the big push and pulls, not just with this movie, but with all film discourse throughout the 2010s, is people arguing about whether or not representation is endorsement, right? And this is like an age-old question that like far precedes the 2010s, but like how we are supposed to deal with like toxic, problematic behavior that we're seeing on screen, I think has been a huge like enraging online debate.
I think it's less about like is depiction endorsement and more like, I mean, this ties into like Joker conversations that people had like earlier in the year and stuff like that, but it's not so much like is the movie endorsing it, but is the movie doing something that will encourage people to do things that we think are harmful?
And the way that
so like that's kind of
the way you put it to me in the past is that like the Wolf of Wall Street will reflect back at you whatever ideology you bring to it. Like if you already have all these assumptions about cool party bros like businessmen being awesome, then the movie can validate that stuff for you. And if you have skepticism about like, those things, it can really like help you dig into that as well.
I guess what I mean by that is like, so you watch a movie like Goodfellas where there's a broad cultural consensus that like the mob is bad, that killing someone is bad. Like those are sort of like broadly held values, and whether or not people like are completely like consistent in those values, I guess we can argue about. But like in general, if you see a person who is a gangster killing someone else, like that, like in our cultural codes, that like reads as like, okay, that's a bad thing. Whereas and I mean the Goodfellas complicates that quite a bit, and like is trying to point out like why this is an alluring thing as well as like something that we say is bad. But like with Wolf of Wall Street, I don't think we have those consensus codes about like legal or semi-legal the financial sector, you know, and the legal or semi-legal behavior of those, right? So I think that like there's a much larger swath of people who look at like how Jordan Belfort manipulates you know, all these people with his like penny stocks, and then like, or even like later on, like how he like, you know, the use of like little people and stuff as objects of amusement, and things like that, you know, where I think that there's not the cultural consensus that we have as far as like, you know, the mafia or that sort of thing. And so that's what makes this movie really weird, is that you find a lot more people who are willing to get in this guy's camp than like say Goodfellas. You don't see, you know, there's a kind of like outlaw appeal to like, you know, Joe Pesci and Goodfellas or something like that. But you don't have people who are like actively wanting to be in the mob, or I feel like that's different, you know, when we're talking about, you know, finance bros. But anyway,
and then of course a finance bro, or not a finance bro, but a, you know, huge business magnate, like toxic business magnate, gets elected president a couple years later. So like clearly the American public has not sorted out its relationship to that stuff in the way that Scorsese would like them to have done.
I don't know.
Other thoughts about Wolf of Wall Street from anybody? I mean, we're going long already, but anything else? How we feel about this movie and with so many years?
Yeah, we're kind of on the long end. So we haven't heard too much. Dylan and Jessica, do you have any like are any of the movies that we've talked about kind of your movies that you think of from this year, or anything else that we've missed?
I got a few things if you want me to go first, Jessica. But so I mean, with Wolf of Wall Street, my only real addition, which I agree with a lot of your Andrew and Michael's points so far, is I think early on in the movie, when the penny stocks and that manipulation was like on the incline, and all the wild shenanigans were only increasing from there, the movie almost gives him a way out, like in terms of the ethics of the situation, in terms of class, because early on the notion was the penny stocks were like just taking gross amounts of money from like postmen and things that are more like blue collar jobs and these kind of things, or like state government low paying jobs. But the jump to Stanton Oakmont or whatever, the bigger corporation that they end up instituting and getting all those people to work for him, it happens because he makes a script that can convince rich people to do the same thing and actually pay into the penny stocks. And so, like, in terms of the ethics of the movie, I think there's a shift there to where, you know, they're still, by the end of it, mostly getting rich people's money, people who are already investing and have the money to invest in the stock market, and kind of letting, which is probably still happening. They're probably still taking poor people's money for those penny stocks, but it, like, goes in such a, it couldn't grow to this gargantuan size that it is unless, you know, they're actually able to get a hold of rich people's investment money. So, but other than that, I mean, I pretty much agree that it feels like a awful reflective mirror, which, because of the ending is like Jordan Belfort is like on a speaking tour, talking to audiences with that core conceit of, you know, sell me this pen. I think it's like in New Zealand, right? At the end, it's so he's going there to teach his people
with the real Jordan Belfort in the movie, getting paid by Scorsese.
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah.
That he introduces the character Jordan Belfort onto the stage, right? But funnily enough, I don't know how or why. I mean, it's not necessarily an unknown conceit to kind of end on an audience shot like that. But I was surprised that basically A Touch of Sin, the Zsa Zhang Ka movie, has basically the same ending.
Was that before or after Wolf of Wall Street?
I think it's a little bit before, because I think it's the same year, but I think Wolf of Wall Street was it's the end of the year movie, right? I think it like was in December for us at least. I don't know, festival circuit. But with A Touch of Sin, which I feel like we'll probably end up talking more about Zsa Zhang Ka in this decade, going forward. We haven't even hit like Mountains Made Apart yet, right? That movie ends. It's so just the long and short of it. It's kind of a vignette movie where they follow individual characters as they're trying to navigate the changing landscape of China. In one of them, it's Zhao Tao, recurring figure in Zhao Zhenka movies. She is like trying to end this guy's marriage in order to like be financially stable with him and have a good life in that way. But he ends up staying with his wife and pushing her away, and she's having to work as like a masseuse that is also functioning as like a sex worker. She gets mad about that because some people do it, but she doesn't, and like she's only there as like a side gig, and she'll like this one fucking guy like ends up like slapping her with money, and she stabs the shit out of him. It's so you get this like broad like violent allegory and on some of the more like refined parts, like anthropological dissection of like how really alienating that kind of power dynamic of capitalism can be, if I'm just like using a vertical slice for that. So the end is this kind of puppet theater play that's trying to like connect everybody watching the puppet theater play as we're all implicated in capitalism and this function of commodification, this kind of thing. And I don't know, I think it just hit. I rewatched it for this podcast and it hit a lot harder for me this time. I mean, I've watched more of the director's movies since, because I think it was with Nathan and then Zach and Andrew, and it went that we all ended up watching Mountains Made Apart. And then so I went back and watched a lot of these, and I still think it's like a really interesting text for the state of things, along with the rest of his movies. So I just want to point that one out, and then two quick ones. I'm serious. It'll be quick. I don't have much of an opinion going forward about Upstream Color. Like I still like that movie a lot, but because Shane Carruth hasn't put out a movie, I just don't know what context to take with it. So it's kind of between that and Primer are the fixtures for that. So I still recommend that Upstream Color. I think it's on Criterion Channel right now. It's a really good 90 minutes. It's still an experience and full of modern day cycles. But filmmakers more short form and experimental that we haven't talked about yet. Jody Mack, Glistening Thrills, Let Your Light Shine, and I think Dusty Stacks came out this year too,
Dusty
right?
Stacks of Mom.
And
the real best
I've
movie
only
of 2013, though no one can see it because it's not widely available at all.
So yeah, to that disappointment. I mean, I've only been pretty much delighted by all of her movies in one shape or form or another. But I can recommend Glistening Thrills. That's just on her Vimeo page. You can watch it. It's like 7 minutes. And I think I talked a lot about Jody Mack like a month or two ago. So I just want to underline that a lot of her work, sadly not Dusty Stacks, is on Vimeo. But for me, a recent comer, like somebody whose work I found out about more recently, is Caligula. I think one of his known pieces of work is being a cinematographer on Lemonade,
which we will definitely talk about
the 4 or 5.
On.
Yeah. But in this year, I think he put out Antonyms of Beauty and Urban Rashomon, and the Urban Rashomon I think even got as like a Criterion short extra on the movie Rashomon.
Oh, cool! I didn't know I had that.
And I mean his work. It's almost like it's experimental and in a way that it's like a lot of collage of different mediums together. He's mostly known as a photographer that takes a lot of street photography. He like interacts with a lot of people on a long time scale. Like he's from neighborhoods that he hangs around a lot, and he talks to all these people that he ends up photographing for like long periods of time and actually builds a relationship. But so it's the photography, but you're also watching a movie of him taking these photos and like being implicated in everything that's going on. But it just, the essence or the stuff of the movie itself is like this really ridiculously beautiful cinematography and also photography. I'm not quite sure how to talk about some of it, because it's just really hard to put my finger down of like how he can stretch out time scale to where you just feel on such a deep level like everything that you're looking at. It's you're like being taken in by so much detail on like such a slow time scale that it's hard to not feel connected in some way. So I don't know. Those are some quick ones. I didn't get to revisit a lot of stuff that I wanted to for this podcast. So it's like Computer Chess and how weird that movie is. I mean, we like support the girls a lot with Wachowski, right, as the director. But that came out that year. And I'm not sure how The Act of Killing holds up as a documentary. I haven't. Do you think it does?
I didn't
Michael?
watch it until just a couple years ago. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think that and The Look of Silence, which came out the following year.
Yeah, thank you. I think A Look of Silence is almost like an important critique on The Act of Killing because of the position of Western filmmakers coming in and trying to out criminal corruption inside of a government.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
I think
kind of a
they're
fucked up
permanently
dynamic,
linked at
so.
this point. Like I would always watch one or both instead of one or the other.
Mm-hmm. And other than that, someone I didn't mention was Amy Simons. She's in Upstream Color.
Don't worry, Jessica. You'll get to talk at some point.
Sorry,
Jessica, you're allowed to talk as long as you fucking want to.
That's please talk as long as you want. She had like a directing career before she was in Upstream Color, and I don't know, so much of I think what I talked originally on that podcast was probably how much Upstream Color is like a singular vision of Shane Carruth. But I don't think that even Upstream Color holds up without her performance in it. So I think it's important to then also, it's like she is a filmmaker in her own right, and Sun Don't Shine is a very strange, like emotionally disturbing movie, and all the things that it draws up. And I think she also did like the Girlfriend Experience, right? She was like the series director for that first season. Am I right?
I don't know, but that sounds cool.
I think I'm right. But so, long and short of it, thank you for all that.
Jessica,
Just some things.
tell us all your
Please.
thoughts. If you're trying to talk right now, we can't hear you, and you need to disconnect and come back.
No, my internet is cutting in and out.
Oh no.
Well, you missed a lot
you hear
from
me?
Dylan.
I heard most of it, but it was cutting in and out. I think Dylan mentioned like all of the movies from 2013. So
What else is there to say?
We didn't mention Spring Breakers yet.
That's not from 2013,
I think it is.
right? Anyways, I think we touched on the ones that I would say were the best. Wolf of Wall Street like made me physically ill after I watched it, like literally.
In a good way or a bad way?
I felt sick. So
It's a very good way.
I would definitely say
Yeah, probably bad.
I would definitely say that Inside Llewyn Davis is my favorite.
Well, I got two clips I'm gonna play, and we can roll out on those. The first one is a clip about a movie that I was surprised to hear mentioned in the original first episode of Cinematary, and a movie that I expected would get a whole lot more conversation in this episode of Cinematary, but did not. And here is that film.
I was laughing a bit ago because I was thinking about for a supporting actor, just have James Franco from Spring Breakers in it. I just started laughing to myself. Spring Break. I can see that. That's a supporting actor. Alien. James Franco. Yeah.
Which, if we had more time, I would give my pitch for why maybe that is the best film of 2013. But there is no time. And then the last clip that I will play is how we signed off of that original episode.
I think we have concluded our first episode. We have so much more to talk about, though.
Yes.
But we'll save that. Thank you for listening, and this is TNJN Radio.
And that's all. We have so much more to talk about. Also, Michael was mentioning in the chat before midnight should have gotten a conversation. That got a long conversation in the first episode of Cinematary. So I think the thesis statement, my takeaway from this episode is there were a lot of really major movies in 2013. Like, this is not like 2011 when the big one is Tree of Life and everything else, kind of falls by the wayside. Not to imply that there weren't other great movies, because we talked about others, but it's hard to pick one for 2013.
It's a good year.
I think for me personally, this was a huge one. Like, this year in particular was huge, and I don't know how much that weighs over that when I survey like 2013. But like, it was when I got my own Netflix account. It was when like a bunch of things happened that. I moved to Knoxville, which of course had like a theater that would show art housey movies as opposed to Jackson, Tennessee, which does not. So like, my memory is that there's this explosion of like great movies in 2013 when that may have been influenced by like my personal circumstances, but also I think that there's some really solid stuff in.
Thus concludes our hour-long part 2.
Yeah, there could almost be a whole other podcast with more 2013 movies, but we have to stop it there because there's stuff going to be cut, and I'm going to tell you it's probably coming in the Bellator.
He made a 7.5 hour movie, yet you cut the 20-minute review.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
Zach.
You could, if you would like to see more about Cinematary, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. He mentioned at the top, but you can go to patreon.com/Cinematary if you would like to support the podcast. All of the money goes to supporting our writers who are doing great, wonderful, hard work on various reviews. You can find writing on Harriet, Dr. Sleep, a Argentinian film called Rojo that Reed wrote about. So please support us on Patreon. We got some good stuff coming up there. Thank you to Cam, Chad Newsom, Christopher Metcalf, Cindy Roberts, Eric Dukowski, Graham Jones, Harry Eskin, Maggie, Marie Barty, Matthew Lingo, Ron Hayes, Tyler Chandler, Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week we will be moving forward with 2014. Nothing clever there. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.